Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tibetan Language Institute's annual bonus lecture. This one is on a few of the few lines from Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation regarding the 6 general topics of unsurpassable enlightenment. So, yeah, the Tibetan Language Institute is an educational nonprofit that offers courses in Dharma Tibetan, mostly for Dharma students. We sometimes have folks who are just very interested in languages or the cultural side or have relatives, things like that. But we focus on Dharma Tibetan. And our principal teacher is David Curtis. And for 30 years, he has guided thousands of students, empowering them to read Tibetan Buddhist prayers and texts. And many have gone on to find careers in Tibetan translation and scholarship. But many of them started right here with TLI, as we call it. So we offer Tibetan courses by Zoom these days, from the very beginning of reading Tibetan up through reading actual texts in translation and in the original in the Tibetan language itself. We also offer student-friendly classical Tibetan study materials that can be used in a self-guided manner if the courses don't align with your schedule or anything like that. And yeah, then we offer a free introductory lecture to what Tibetan language is all about a couple of times a year. And then this bonus lecture we've been offering about once a year as a thank you to our community and in case people are interested in seeing more about what we do without enrolling in an actual course. So thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to offer this to you. And with that, I think I'll hand it off to David. Thank you all.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome. Great to be back with you. Great to see some of you, some of your names coming up, some people that I've been connected with for a long, long time. Have registered for the class. And then some of you are more new to the TLI experience. So yes, much gratitude. Thanks very much, Benta. So yes, so the text that we're going to talk about today is a very important and famous text. It's one of that class of texts that are called Lam Rim, and that means stages of the path. Lam is path and Rim is stage. Written by Gampopa. So there, as a way to begin, I'll just mention that there are 4 translations that I know of Gampopa's book or parts of it, and I just thought I would mention those and briefly here at the beginning. So the first one that was made into English was translated by Herbert Gunther, and Gunther was a pioneering translator. So that book went through a few different editions, and it was Gunther who gave it the title in translation of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And then people that read Tibetan can see that it's by Gampopa here. Everyone can see, but that little S at the bottom, that's a silent superscribed letter. And that's the transliteration of Gampopa's name. So translated and annotated by Herbert Gunther. I have a long history myself with this book. Just a brief anecdote about it. When I was first new to the Dharma, Deanna and I were in France, and one of my favorite haunts in the whole country of France is Shakespeare and Company, the bookstore on the left bank in Paris. And I was in that store and I bought a copy of the book, and it was a hardback copy of the Shambhala edition of Gunther's translation. And strangely enough, inside, it was a used book. And the book's the book was dedicated from David to David. So two other Davids uh, had the book before me. Um, anyway, Gunther's translation is challenging and difficult. And over the years, I've read it and reread it, and I love Gunther's work myself. I know he's controversial. So can we show the image of the next book the next edition I want to mention was the Tubchen Jinpa edited, Ken Holmes translated Ornament of Precious Liberation. Yep, thanks, George. So this is the same book, the same Tibetan text translated into English, but with an alternate translation of the title. So sometimes there's a little ambiguity about which words modify which words and anyway, so that's something a phenomenon that we have with Gampopa's text. And so Ken Holmes published an edition of this years and years ago with a different title. And then Thupten Jinpa, you may know, is the Dalai Lama's translator. He has a PhD in the West, so he's like eminently qualified and a really fine scholar. Um, so that's an addition. I won't be talking about any more about those two today. And then Benta mentioned John Rockwell's grammar book that we use in most all of our reader classes that we've ever taught. And these days, the last decade, I think all of them. And Rockwell's excellent grammar has a second volume, and that's his reader. And this is a synopsis of Gampopa's Jewel Ornament, or he, I'll just flip it open here and see what he calls the text. He calls it the Ornament of Precious Liberation, as did Holmes and Jinpa. So that's a brilliant synopsis and a wonderful translation, and they're laid out as in a Tibetan reader style. Okay, and then the fourth volume that I want to talk about is also called the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And it's by Khenchen Konchog Gyaltsen Rinpoche, who's now referred to as Khenchen, and it's edited by the remarkable scholar Annie K. Trinley Chudran. She's a Khenmo now. They're both wonderful people and amazing scholars, and I'll say a little bit more about them in just a moment. Okay, so I just wanted to share with you those four books that I know about, the four translations that are out there. Let's now, as we usually do, let's turn and do a brief practice to Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. So we tune into our own illuminated Manjushri nature, you could say, by doing this, the Buddha nature. So Manjushri is the Bodhisattva of wisdom, so we call forth wisdom. And as a text, there's a little part at the end that where we're asking Manjushri to grant us the luminosity of confident wisdom. And I always like to think if we have that, then we can learn anything with ease, right? Okay, so we have Jampel, Yangki, Tupa, Gong Loma, Zhejiawa, Jukso as a title. And then I'll read the phonetics of the translation and come back, we'll read the Tibetan. And if you like, you can visualize Manjushri in space in front of you as we do this. I prostrate to the Lama and protect your Manjushri. Your mind is completely pure and luminous, like the sun, free from the clouds of the two obscurations. You hold a text at your heart, since you see all the variety of objects just as they are. You love, like your only child, all the multitude of beings who are trapped by the darkness of ignorance and the prison of samsara and are afflicted by suffering. Your speech, possessing the 60 kinds of melody, roars mightily like a dragon. Thus you awaken from the sleep of the Kleshas, liberate from the chains of karma, and dispel the darkness of ignorance. You hold aloft a sword, since you cut all the sprouts of suffering. You are primordially pure and have completed the 10 bhumis. You have perfected all the qualities. The Kaya of the elder son of the victorious one is adorned with the 112 ornaments. You dispel the darkness of my mind. I pay homage to Manjushri. Now, in Tibetan. Lama Da Gumpo Jampel Yangla Chukselo Gongi Lodra Dripni Trindral Nitar Namdak Rabsel Jine Dunkun Jijian Zichir Niki Tukar Lekbam Zen Gongdak Sipe Senrar Marik Muntum Duknal Gizir Wei Droso Kunla Buchik Tarse Yenlak Drukchui Yangden Sung Druktar Cherdrok Nyanmong Yilong Leki Chakdrok Drose Cheng Marig Moon, excuse me, Marig Moonsel Duknel Nugu Jinye Chuze Rodri Nam Dune Dakching Sachui Tarsan Yuntan Luzok Gelse Tuwoi Ku Chu Trak, Chu Dong, Chu Nyi, Gentre, Dak Loi, Munsel, Jompel, Yang La, Du. Now we visualize that light comes from Manjushri's heart to our heart and transforms us into Manjushri. This is a tantric practice. And now we recite the mantra of Manjushri several times. So that's Om Arapachana DDD. 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 When we're visualizing ourselves as Manjushri, we can visualize the last syllable in the mantra is the seed syllable, the D. Perfect there. Highlighted nicely for us there. So we can visualize having a D the size of our thumbnail at our throat chakra and a D the size of our thumb at our heart center. And then the little one on top is raining down a waterfall of luminous orange radiant D seed syllables into the one in our heart, which becomes ever more effulgent, brilliant, shining out. And then what we do is take a big breath and then we recite the seed syllable 108 times. So I'll count, but for those of you who are new to this practice. So it helps to like expel the breath first and then take a full in breath, and then I'll do that and then chant the 108 while doing that visualization. Now we dissolve the visualization of ourselves as Manjushri just down to the standing orange radiant seed syllable D in our heart center. Then we dissolve that, dissolving away from top to bottom those two circles called Visarga. And then from the bottom up, we dissolve that little ah, then the ha, then the da, and then the gigu, the top element. We dissolve everything away into a state of luminous emptiness, and we rest there for a few seconds. Then we have a short verse at the end to conclude this little practice. O loving one, by the rays of your supreme knowledge, dispel the darkened ignorance of my mind, that I might understand the teachings and the commentaries as in the canon. I beseech you to grant the luminosity of confident wisdom. Then that part in Tibetan. Seidan keiki kenrab uzergi dakloi timuk munpar rabsel ne kadang tenchu jungluk tokpai lodra pope nangwa tseldu tso. Okay, La. So at baseball games, they play the Star Spangled Banner, the national anthem, and then they begin. So that's kind of the Buddhist version referring to Manjushri. Okay, so just a brief show and tell item. This is the Pecha. Pecha is the word for Tibetan text of the Jewel Ornament by Gampopa. We put these little sleeves in to hold the book together because the books are unbound. And just briefly, so in Old Tibet, this would be wooden, and then maybe with a gold title, and then the books open like that with loose pages. Anyway, that's a Pecha. That I just showed you. That's Gampopa's book, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. Okay. So so now I'll turn to and refer to and read just a little bit from this book, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation by Khenchen Konchog Gyaltsen. So some preparatory matter. It's autograph for me back in April of 2001. I had a remarkable meeting with Rinpoche, Khenchen Konchog Gyaltsen, and we were both kind of delighted to discover that my root lama was the late Kalo Rinpoche, and Khenchen Konchog Gyaltsen took refuge with Kalo Rinpoche. I don't know if that was in Tibet. That may well have been in Tibet in the old days, but in any case, I talked to him, I had been following him in Southern California on a series of teachings that he was giving. And he was happy to hear that I was, helping people learn Tibetan. And I told him about how we made readers different. So we make a series of grammars. We have a series of grammars, and after someone knows how to read the script and has the fundamentals of grammar, then we have other texts that Benta was mentioning that we call readers, and then we have like a 10-week course, for instance, going through going through a reader, which might be part of a famous text, like a chapter from Shantideva or something like that. In early ones, we had the Jewel Ornament, and the Khenpo was delighted with that. Khenchen Rinpoche was, and told me that I could use any one of his books to if I wanted a translation for the readers. So I don't think I have ever done that, but maybe once with the early Jewel Ornament, we had a few different translations. But anyway, so today things are kind of coming full circle after quite a long while, and in the handouts that we're going to use to study this short verse from the Jewel Ornament, we have Khenchen's translation. So just I just want to mention that and acknowledge him again and gratitude to him. But also I have great gratitude for him for this tremendous book that he did. So this book isn't just a translation of the Jewel Ornament. It's it has a wonderful introduction where there's a synopsis of each of the chapters in the book. So in effect, you can get an amazing introduction to Mahayana Tibetan Buddhism by just reading the introduction. It's really fantastic. And then throughout Gampopa's book, he refers to a great many famous Buddhist stories. And then another one of my teachers, friends of the Khenpo, compiled all of those stories So the Kenshin and the Kenmo, they translated all of those stories in the back of the book in Appendix B. So that was really uh, that's a wonderful thing. I mean, it's just fantastic just to read the different stories. There starts with the story of Gampopa, but all these different Buddhist stories that were mentioned in the root text are back there in as well. It's a fantastic book. Okay, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about that because we're going to zoom in on just reading one verse from that text today. And many of you know what I'm up to, and you've seen me do this kind of thing before, but we've parsed the verse out, and then I'm going to go through it and explain and show how we read Tibetan. But first, there's a foreword by the Dalai Lama that I thought I would read most of. It's not too long. So he says, I'm pleased to learn that the Drikung Kagyu Tibetan Meditation Center is publishing an English version of Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So this is His Holiness Tenzin Gyatso, the Dalai Lama. Gampopa is also known by the name Dakpo Laje, the physician from Dakpo, which is a place in Tibet. Of all the disciples of Milarepa, the two most important were called the sun and the moon, and Gampopa was the sun disciple, S-U-N. He was a great, kind-hearted teacher and a practitioner of vast learning and discipline. The text is an excellent work that reflects the blending of two systems of teaching, the Kadampa tradition and the Mahamudra tradition. So the Kadampa, both of these are sourced in India, you could say. The Kadampa tradition was brought to Tibet by Atisha, who's one of the most famous great figures that came from India to Tibet to help establish the Dharma. Also known are the Kadampas for the mind training tradition, for instance. And the class we've just completed was the 8 verses of mind training. Anyway, that's the Kadampa tradition. And the Mahamudra tradition is a tradition that traces back to India, but comes to India via Marpa and then Milarepa. Marpa is called the translator, the great translator, and then Milarepa is probably the most famous yogi and realized master from Tibet. Gampopa received complete transmission of Jowo J's Lamrim tradition. So Jowo J is an honorific epithet for Atisha. The stages of the path, Lamrim tradition, and Naropa's Mahamudra tradition. So Naropa was the great master from India, and then Marpa went and studied in India. He went to India 3 times, studying in Naropa's tradition. This text is therefore a Lamrim text and reflects the Madhyamika philosophical view, but it also implicitly reflects the teachings of Anuttara Yoga Tantra and Mahamudra. Mahamudra is not explained explicitly, however, as this is a sutric text, and Mahamudra deals with the secret teachings of Tantra. Since many Westerners are now taking keen interest in the teachings of the Buddha, the English version of this wonderful teaching is timely, and I'm sure that it will be of great help to English readers. I would like to remind the reader that it's not enough to simply know the meaning of the Dharma. One must always make an effort to implement it in our day-to-day life and to sincerely follow the way of practice that Milarepa and Gampopa have shown us. June 10th, 1996. Okay, so that's the Dalai Lama intro. There was one then the translator's introduction begins on unmarked page 15, and I'll just read very briefly from that. He opens it with, I pay homage to all the root and lineage lamas. Please grant your blessings to me and to all sentient beings. Dharma Lord Gampopa, I think there's a typo here. It's 1079 to 1153 of the current era, our era. So he's spanning the 11th and 12th centuries, the time of Renaissance in the Dharma in Tibet. So Gampopa, the author of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, was fully accomplished in the teachings and practice of Buddhism, the philosophy taught by Shakyamuni Buddha circa 560 BCE. Gampopa studied the sutra system of training in the Kadampa lineage and obtained tantra training from the great saint Milarepa. Because he himself thus embodied the complete form of Buddhism, Lord Gampopa successfully established complete Buddhism in Tibet. His lineage of disciples pervaded the whole of Jambudvipa, our world, and became the crown jewel of Buddhism. Okay, that's a little bit from the introduction, written by the translator, Khenchen Konchog Gyaltsen. Now, the actual book itself, the translation of Gampopa's text, on 43, they have a title page, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation, the Wish-Fulfilling Gem of the Noble Teachings by Gampopa. And then an homage, I prostrate to the noble Manjushri in youthful form. I pay homage to the victorious ones, their followers, the holy Dharma, and to the lamas who are their foundation. This noble teaching, which is like the wish-fulfilling jewel, will be written for the benefit of myself and others by depending on the kindness of Mila and Lord Atisha. So that's Gampopa writing there. Now, this is Gampopa's introduction. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to read a page to you, and then that sets the scene for the work with the text that we can do, work with the Tibetan text, which is the main project here today. So this is Gampopa. In general, all phenomena are included in the two categories of samsara and nirvana. That which is called samsara is empty by nature, a confused projection. Its defining characteristic is that it manifests as suffering. That which is called nirvana is also empty by nature, but all the confused projections are exhausted and dissipated. Its defining characteristic is freedom from all suffering. Who is it that is confused in samsara? All sentient beings of the three realms are confused. On what basis does confusion arise? Confusion arises on the basis of emptiness. What causes confusion to arise? The cause of confusion is great ignorance. How does this confusion operate? It operates through the activities and experiences of the 6 realms of migrators. What exemplifies this confusion? The confusion is like sleep and dream. When did this confusion originate? The confusion originated in beginningless samsara. What is the error of this confusion? All experiences are suffering. When can this confusion be transformed into primordial wisdom? When one attains unsurpassable enlightenment. If you think that perhaps the confusion will disappear by itself, we keep hoping, then understand that samsara is known to be endless. Understand that samsara is confusion. Understand how much suffering there is. Understanding how long it endures. Understanding that there is no self-liberation. Therefore, from today onward, you should make as much effort as possible to achieve unsurpassable enlightenment. What manner of things are needed in order to make this kind of effort? And this brings us to, so he's been writing in prose up to this point. Now he's going to write a little poem, a verse poem, and that's what we're going to study right now. So first I'll read the introduction, the summary. So what do we need in order to make this effort from now until enlightenment? To make that effort, what do we need? The summary, the primary cause, working basis, contributory cause, method, result, and activities. All discriminating beings should understand that these 6 comprise the general explanation of unsurpassable enlightenment. So that's the text we're going to look at in about 1 minute here. But I'll read the rest of the introduction. It's quite short. The primary cause of unsurpassable enlightenment, the person who is the working basis for the achievement of enlightenment, the contributory causes that encourage one in practice, the method of practice, the result that is accomplished, and the activities ensuing from accomplishment. These are the topics one should understand. To explain them in order, the primary cause is the essence of the well-gone one. As a working basis, the precious human life is excellent. The contributory cause is the spiritual master. The method is the spiritual master's instruction. The result is the body of perfect Buddhahood. The activities are benefiting sentient beings without conceptual thought. These 6 topics form the body of the text. Now the limbs will be explained in detail. So we won't go on to the limbs. So that's his introduction. So in a way, that's a synopsis of the entire book itself. So if we understood this introduction well, that would be a great thing. You know, we would have a pretty good understanding of the Mahayana path of Buddhism right there. Okay. So now we'll turn to the little text we put together for today. So here it is, the 6 general topics of unsurpassable enlightenment and succinct definitions of the 6 general topics. Selected verses from the Jewel Ornament of Liberation by Gampopa, 1079 to 1153. They were talking 12th century there. Okay, so then this is a mini version of what the Tibetan Language Institute readers look like. And this is a part, the section here where we call the parsing table on the left, and then the worksheets for translation and taking notes on the right. The Tibetan is the same for these two. So since we're writing, most of us are writing right-handed, we put the page to be written on the right-hand side there. So, so what the way that I share about reading Tibetan is with a reader like this, I'll spell a line in Tibetan and then read it out, and then we go over to the parsing page and talk about what that line means. So, and then I've reproduced the translation that I just read at the bottom, Khenchen Konchog Gyaltsen translation of this first part. So this page, the summary, the primary cause, working basis, contributory cause, method, result, and activities. So that's what we're going to look at on this page. And we'll take some time with that and spell it and read it and talk about it a little bit. And then, as Benta mentioned, we'll have some Q&A at the end. So I hope you've printed this out. If you print this out, then you can take notes, write in it. Okay, so spelling them, we'll just jump right in. Sa, data da, naro do, ma, dome, na, giguni, dome ni. Okay, now we go over and look at the parsing tape, corresponding parsing line. So this is dome ni again in a box. And then on top of the box, there's a little reference there. So TLI line 2.12.2. Back in the day, we put together a reader for the intro that I just read you. We have that as a translation workbook. Now that was back in the day before we parsed the text, so it doesn't have parsing, but that is a TLI text that we have. And maybe if all goes well, we have lots of projects at TLI and limited resources, but maybe we'll parse the entire intro and then teach that as a course, as we've done in the past. But now, if we are able to parse it and put a new edition together, then the student will have the parsing pages that looks quite like this. And so that's reference to the TLI earlier edition, that 2.12.2. and that means page 2, line 12, and then within line 12, the second chunk of Tibetan. And then we also reference John Rockwell, aforementioned reader, uh, based on the Jewel Ornament. Okay, and then now to the Tibetan dome needs. Well, dome is just a word that means summary. And then ni is a topic marking particle. So this functions quite like the English colon, the colon being the punctuation mark of 2 dots, one on top of the other there. Yeah, that looks like it could be a fly speck or something, but it's actually a colon. And then I should say that Benta did a tremendous job putting together this little booklet here. I think it's really nicely done. I hope you think so too. So Domni is just like saying summary colon. And so you see the Khenchen's translation, he said the summary and a colon. Tibetan doesn't have a word for the. And so he's been writing in prose. So the bulk of what I was reading there from the intro is in prose. But now one of our greatest translators is Richard Barron, aka Shiki Nima. And Richard came 3 times and taught us Gampopa, by the way, for early Tibetan seminars. From the very beginning, I think I started teaching in 1992. But after teaching about a year, we put together a seminar of people that could read a bit of Tibetan, and people came from near and far. And the translator, Sarah Harding, taught us the Heart Sutra. And then Thupten Rinpoche, who was then called Tukul Thupten Rinpoche, he came and taught us calligraphy because he didn't speak English yet. And now he's become famous all around the world. And he's come a number of times as a guest teacher. And then we've had people like Lama Yeshe Wangmo has come and taught for us. John Pettit was a translator with a PhD from Columbia, has come and taught. Richard Barron taught 3 times. And so that's something that we like to do sometimes. I hope we can get back to doing that. It's lots of fun because then we meet in person rather than just on Zoom. And then we have a great scholar translator leading us. So it's really quite fun. We've read a whole variety of different texts, and we've done the Heart Sutra a couple times in that way because it's so important. But anyway, Richard Barron, that's the reason I mentioned him was that he said, as someone with great familiarity with this text and a master translator who's read and translated books from many different lineages and teachers, he said that Gampopa is a very compassionate writer. So we as beginners, this is the best text maybe to read. If you want to talk about reading a whole Tibetan book, the best one maybe to read is Gampopa because he is so compassionate, so clear. And so he writes in a style, one aspect about the style, and he's mostly teaching us in prose, but then when he quotes from a text, a sutra, for instance, then that quote will often be in poetry, in verse. And also, so then at the very beginning here, this is a verse of his own composition that he, drops on us, gives us here. And I think part of his being a compassionate being, writing a Lam Rim is a compassionate thing to do because you take a vast body of knowledge, in this case, Hinayana and Mahayana Buddhism, and you reduce it to one book, like this. That's a compassionate thing to do. And then as Gampopa did, if it's written in an accessible style where young beginning people, maybe monklets at the beginning of their career in Tibet, and now for 1,000 years, people of all lineages read this book, by the way, because it's such a wonderful introduction to the Mahayana. And so I think he's giving us this in verse because it's easier to memorize things in verse than in prose. So then this 4-line form is a classic form throughout Tibetan literature in tens of thousands of books. That might sound like an exaggeration, but I don't think it is. They use the form called the shloka, and it's their version of something that was done in the Buddhist texts in India. But the Tibetan shloka has 4 lines, and the 4 lines uh, that make up one shloka each have 7 or 9 syllables. Sometimes you see other versions, but very, very often 7 or 9. So if we count these in the box, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this little shloka that we're going to study today is a 4-line verse. Some people call it a quatrain, because qua means 4, right? But we just call them a shloka. That's what the Tibetans call them. And yes, 7 lines each. So now I'll go to the second line and spell that. So so he's basically saying, but Dom Ni, now here's a 4-line shloka that sums up the entire path to enlightenment, but this whole book that I'm going to write. And then when I read the introduction, one of the things he said was, this has been the body. Here's the body. Now I'm going to teach the limbs. And so he goes in through, it's been a while since I think it's 18 chapters. He's going to teach each of these points that he summarizes, that he synopsizes in this shloka. Then he teaches them at length. And that becomes the limbs. But now we're going to focus on the body. So I spell on page 3 there, Ra, Gata Ga, Yata Gya, Shabku Gu, Da, Ra, Dong, Ra, Tata Ta, Drengbu Te, Na, Ten, Da, Na, Dong, Ra, Kata Ka, Yata Kya, Drengbu Ke, Na, Ken, Da, Na, Dong, Na, Giguni. That was the spelling. Now I read that line. Gu, Dong, Ten, Dong, Ken, Dong, Ni. So we see some repetition there, right? So I think he's laying it out as simple as he possibly could as the compassionate writer. So we're very fortunate living at this time that we do, because throughout the 1300 years that Buddhism thrived without obstacle, in a way, without any foreign power making the study and practice of the teachings illegal, for 1300 years, the Tibetans took these teachings to heart and practiced and propagated them. And they began to write their own texts. And that's what we have here. They translated thousands and thousands of the texts from India. They wrote commentaries and then commentaries on the commentaries. They debated them. They practiced them. They took them to heart, as the Dalai Lama suggested that we do. And so this whole great body of teachings unfolded in Tibet. And some of the people that became what we now call great masters were extraordinary, world historical figures that did something unbelievably beautiful based on their kindness, their loving compassion for us beings, confused beings in the world. And then they had a considerable amount of power too. Sometimes the Tibetans talk about the Gunpo Sum, the 3 protectors, and they're 3 deity archetypes that represent 3 energies. And one is love and compassion. That's often Chenrezig. And one is wisdom. That's Manjushri. And then the third, there's some power figure, so like Vajrapani, for instance. And those 3 protectors represent those 3 energies. And then some of the great people came to embody them in themselves and then wrote these works. And then we have the good fortune that some of the greatest masters of Tibet came out of Tibet and then came to so many, many other countries of the world, like the USA, where I am speaking today. These great masters that took those teachings to heart and maybe did, you know, long years of retreat, long years of study and practice, but taking them to heart, they became extraordinary beings as well. And I think Khenchen and Konchog Gyaltsen is one of those people. And so we're the beneficiaries of that. And of course, it goes all the way back to the Buddha. I was just talking about the 1300 years in Tibet, but all the way back to the Buddha, 2400, 2500 years ago. And so the creme de la creme, the best of the best, has been preserved for us. And this text is one of those items. And now we're learning Tibetan and we can read it in Tibetan. And we can rely on the wonderful translations, the aforementioned 4 translations. But I think that's an extraordinary thing, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all of you that are making TLI possible to do this. But, Deanna, George, and Benta that work with me at TLI, and then all of you who have taken classes and support us in many different ways. So much gratitude. Okay, now the parsing of line 1. So I couldn't go on without saying that. Excuse me. Okay, so we've got Ragata Gayata Gyasham Kyu Kyu. The Tibetans very often put the most important thing first. In the Manjushri prayer, it starts off, right, Lama Dong Gunpo, Lama and Protector. A very, very common refuge prayer, the one that says, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, right? It starts off with Sangye. That's the subject here, folks. That's what life is all about. Song in and gay in. Song to purify, to wake up from the sleep of ignorance and purify the obstacles to our recognizing our true infinite nature, that's emptiness and light, luminous emptiness. And then gay, expanding the beautiful qualities that lie within. But anyway, here in our text, when he's saying, now I'm going to tell you what you need to become a practitioner. That book, What Makes You Not a Buddhist? This is a book, What Makes You a Buddhist? You could say the verse we're translating today, this is what it is to be a Buddhist on the Mahayana path of Tibetan Buddhism. And then, so what's he going to start with? He's starting with Gyu. So Gyu is a word that can mean cause. Gunther goes on in a lengthy footnote on how it actually means motive. So we put motive in there. That's like a tip of the hat to the great master translator Gunther. And then most people call it cause. And then Khenchen calls it the primary cause. This, to let the cat out of the bag a little bit, the primary cause is that in the Tibetan teachings, have their base in India, and the teachings of the Buddha, everything goes back there. This refers to our Buddha nature, that we have a luminous heart mind. That's our true reality, you could say. So the causes of our becoming enlightened, we have within us. And that's the Gyu. That's the primary cause of our being able to achieve enlightenment, is the fact that, heavily disguised, perhaps, but each of us is a Buddha. And then dong is a little bit simpler. So dong is a grammatical particle. So in the first 2 syllables, we see the 2 basic kinds of Tibetan syllable. There's bona fide words like gyu, and then there are grammatical particles like dong and. So English has articles like a, an, and the. Articles are a kind of particle. The English prefixes and suffixes are, you could say that they're actually particles, and that we stick on words. Like we have a word like possible, right? And then we put on impossible on the beginning of it, right? Or visible, and then in. Well, the vis is the Latin root to see, and invisible. And then we put in on it to negate it, right? And then the bull ending to make it an adjective. We don't think about that with English, because the basic building block of the language, of a text, of a page of writing, is the word in English, and we separate the words like that. We separate the words in English, right? With the space. Tibetan doesn't separate the words, it separates the syllables with the dot. So that invites us to conclude that the principal building block of the language is actually the syllable. Then there are two kinds of syllables, bona fide words like gyu, and then these particles that can organize the words or build the words. Or as organizers, they're like syntactic particles. They organize the words together. Like, for instance, they might indicate in a sentence which word is the subject of the sentence. So it's like a flag that's saying this word here is a noun and the subject of the sentence, and another word might be an adjective or a direct object or indirect object as a noun. Okay, so then for beginning students of Tibetan, we've got a word and a particle right here together, and now he's going to go word particle, you know. So 10 is the basis or support, ratatata dringbutena 10. So these words that he's using, he's chosen extremely carefully, and they're full of nuance and meaning and then depending on the context in which they occur, they can mean many other different things. They can combine with other words to make new words. They can be modified by other words, but always the context is extremely important to determine what they mean. And so we're just translating them here because we have limited space, a translation that's relevant to this particular text. Okay, so 10 is the basis or support. Now he's going to go on later to tell us that the basis is the precious human life. Me, human, Lu, body, Rinpoche, precious. Milu Rinpoche, which I didn't know when I went into 3-year retreat, but Milu Rinpoche is not a person like Khenchen Rinpoche and Anam Thupten Rinpoche. Milu Rinpoche is not a person. It means precious human body. That's what the basis is. So everybody's got the cause, the motive within them, this Buddha nature, and then now we've got the basis in which that resides, you could say, this human life that we've got going. That's one of the other 6 topics that we need to know about that plays the role in our achieving enlightenment. And then the next dong is a dong particle. Again, we just call it the dong particle. It does 5 basic things. And then the DT reference, DT 56 to 57, after someone has completed the level 1 and learned to read the script, and then completed level 2 and learned the very basis of some of the grammar and syntax, and maybe level 3, more grammar and syntax as well as vocab. Then the Divine Tree Grammar poem is an exceedingly important text, and it gives us a tremendous amount of information in 100 lines about all of these particles that I was referring to. Okay, and so dong is just, for now, in this context, just saying and. So the primary cause and the working basis. And then ken, rakataka dringbuke na ken, means condition. So people that have studied the Dharma, they've heard teachers and read in books that are constantly talking about causes and conditions. So nothing comes about that's not interdependent and all involved with having the proper causes and conditions that allow it to come about, that, cause it to come about. Okay. And so the condition then is kind of surprising. And that's the teacher, the spiritual master, as Khenchen translates it later on. So we've got the cause, Buddha nature, the basis, our precious human body, and then the ken, the teacher, the spiritual master, and then dong again, and then nagiguni is a topic marking particle that they sometimes just use to fill in the meter because he wants to get to 7 syllables per line. And so gyu dong ken dong, gyu dong ten dong ken dong ni. This is a poem of 7 syllables, right? Okay, and there's the first line. So those 3, and so for just forgetting the context a little bit, and we're just looking at this, we just see a series of nouns, but then we do see a ni continuation particle. So, and then it ends with dong. So we carry on, but we don't know what they're doing or what part of speech they are or how they fit in yet. So we need more data. So we go on to line 2 over on page 3. I'll spell that. Ta, ba, sa, top, da, na, dong, a, o, ba, rata, dra, sa, dre, ba, shabku, bu, a, o, pa, rata, tra, gigu, tri, na, trin, la, sa, lay, ta, drangbu, te. So I spelled it. Now I'll read it. Top, dong, drebu, trinlay, te. Top, dong, drebu, trinlay, te. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if we're just reading this text, like in the Pecha, where this occurs in the Pecha, the Pecha looks like this. The Tibetan, this is a typical Tibetan page. And then their letters, their syllables separated by dots. And so it just goes on and on like that, the Tibetan page. So that's why we make a reader and break the lines out, make it easier to access. But so he's writing away in prose, as I was saying there, and then Tibetans don't indent, like in the English translations, the when he's quoting a sutra, for instance, then he'll indent and put the quote smaller, right? The main text on the page in English is out here, and then he indents smaller where there's a quotation. Tibetan doesn't do that. So one of the only clues is that when you're reading the text itself and you come upon something and you see a couple of like 777 lines of 7 syllables long, um, that's the hint that, oh, maybe this is meter. And so if you count and you find 4 of them, as we do here, and then it goes back to prose, it's definitely meter. But Gampopa, being the compassionate one again, helps us out by saying dome ni. Here's the summary. And then you go gyu dong ten dong ken dong ni. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the next one is top dong dre bu trin lay te. Yes, we have meter. So in writing meter, just as English, I was going to grab an English poem because sometimes we don't remember this off the top of our heads, but English poetry plays fast and loose with the rules of grammar, like word order and all kinds of things, because it's poetry, right? And so too in Tibetan, the rules are let go sometimes, and things are left out that would be in prose that would make it easier to read. So it's helpful to know that we've just dropped into meter, and then here we find 2 7s in a row, so there's probably going to be 2 more, is the conclusion that the savvy reader would make. But let's look at the parsing table. So the parsing table, the first box there says top, tabasa top. This is a huge concept in Buddhism. This is moyen in French. This is method, means, skillful means, expedient means, something like that. So he's going to explain it for us later on. So I'm, as I was saying, letting the cat out of the bag, I'm explaining a little bit, which is not in the Tibetan right here, but then he teaches us later on. So it's maybe helpful to know now. But top, the method, that refers to the spiritual teacher's teaching. So the Kempo says the summary, the primary cause, the working basis, the contributor cause, the method. So that's method, that's top, the method. So that refers to the the teacher's teaching, the teaching of the Dharma. So in the actual book, when we get into the main part of the book, he's going to have one chapter on primary cause, one chapter on working basis, one chapter on contributory cause, and then I can't remember, it's either 16 or 18 just on method, and then one chapter on result and one chapter on activities, because that's what we want is the teachings, right? If we're going to get there. So so if we have a teacher, then we've already got the Gyu, the Ten, and the Ken. We've got the cause, the Buddha nature, the Ten, the basis, the precious human body, which is not any human body, by the way, but someone who's interested in these things that we're talking about today has the precious human body. And then the Ken, the teacher, and then the teachings. So it's kind of cool. We've got the teachings in the book here. And Gampopa did say, by the way, if you read this and one other of his texts, it's the same as meeting him in person, being able to sit beside him and get teachings in person from him. Okay, so and then we have another dong particle, which again just means and. So we've got a list going, right? And then Drebu. So as in English, so in Tibetan, that there's a vast vocabulary of just ordinary words, like fruit, right? Just ordinary, like an apple. But in context, then fruit refers to something in particular here. And so it's one of the things that we need to know about and study. And it turns out that fruit is enlightenment. So you can see what's happening. We've got the primary cause, the working basis, the contributory cause, the method, and the result. So the average person, ordinary person going, well, cool, that must be the end of the story because it's enlightenment. And that's what we're talking about reaching, So we've got the cause, support, and the condition, et cetera, so that must be it. But no, there's something else. So here, because of meter, he leaves out the next dong, which would mean and after fruit. And then we come to Trinley. And Trinley means Buddha activity or enlightened activity. And someone calls it exalted activity. So it's just not like crazy person like me activity, taking out the garbage. It could be if the taking out the garbage was done with a particular mindset, right? But you know what I mean? It's just not ordinary activity, but it's the activity that's spontaneously engaged in without having any concept about it. And that activity is to benefit all beings. That's the activity performed by someone who's achieved the Drebu, who is enlightened, ergo, who is a Buddha. So these are the 6 general topics of unsurpassable enlightenment right there, laid out in 2 lines. But he's going to provide a little bit more context for us. So let's go on to the next set of pages. So page 6 and 7.
It's page 4 and 5, not 6 and 7. We're already there.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I'm thinking about so many things that he just said. Okay, so same MO over on page 5. We spell Balatala Ma Drengbu Me Da Me Bayata Jang Chashab Kyu Chu Ba Chup Sapata Payata Chagi Guchi Sadata Da Naro Doma Dom Darata Drashab Kyu Dru Ga Druk. That's the spelling. Now the reading. Lame Changchu Chidom Druk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Lame Jiangchu Chidom Druk. Looking at the parsing, we have lame that sounds a whole lot like lama, and the la is the same la, and la means to, be the best of something, to be great, to be superior. And may is actually a particle that means less or without or not. So that comes into one English word, unsurpassable. But, you know, look at unsurpassable in English. You know, you've got the un at the beginning and the able, right? And then sur and pass, right? So English operates a lot like Tibetan, individual syllables being glued together to make words. That's something that shares with Tibetan. So lame is unsurpassable. Now, adjectives follow the word they modify, usually the word they qualify. And here the next word is Zhangchu, which is enlightenment. That's purified and perfected. Two words. Zhang is purified, Chu is perfected. Purified and perfected. Purified away all the dross, the limitations, the obstacles, remove the veils and whatnot, and then expand that which is there that's true and beautiful, you know, like wisdom and love, for instance. And when that process is completed, you have someone who is enlightened. But here it's a noun, enlightenment. And so there's normally a particle, if the adjective comes first, a genitive particle that connects the lame to the enlightenment, so we know their relationship exactly. That would be what it would look like in prose. But this is poetry, and he's only got 7 lines, so he just chucks the modifier out, and we have to just draw the conclusion ourselves that unsurpassable goes with enlightenment. And as a unsurpassable modified enlightenment rather than the other way around, which would be strange. Okay, so unsurpassable enlightenment. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're here for, right? In Buddhism, it's what we're here for in life. Okay, and then we move on and we find this word sapatapayata chagigu chi is a word that can mean general, and that's what it does mean here too. And then we have dome, summary, and then this is the same word that we had at the beginning of the text, dome ni, the summary follows. Yep, there it is. Good job. Dome, and then back to dome. But it can also mean topic or index or something like that. And then druk is the number 6, following the word it modifies like it's supposed to. So the 6 topics, general, there should be a genitive in between general and topic also. Yep, exactly. So the 6 general topics, and then another particle of unsurpassable enlightenment. But he basically just says unsurpassable enlightenment, general topic 6. So what he's saying is that the above 2 lines are the 6 general topics of unsurpassable enlightenment. The 6 basic topics, you know, parenthetically, that you need to know about this subject of unsurpassable enlightenment. So again, we're just not talking about some kind of generic low-grade enlightenment, but unsurpassable enlightenment, the complete and total enlightenment. Like in the Heart Sutra when it says, gone to the far shore, you know, but of enlightenment, you know, it's the same idea. Okay, so then onward back to page 5 for the 4th line of our 4-line shloka. We've got balata la naro lo, la data da na den, ranata namasa nam, kayata kyagi gu ki sa ki, shadring bu she sa she, para par, bayata jam, which reads, Loden Namki Sheparja. Okay, now let's look at the parsing. So there's a lot of different words for mind in Tibetan, and lo refers to intellect or conceptual mind. And then den is a particle that means it's a verb, but it functions kind of like a particle. It's a verb that means to possess or have. And it's a class 4 verb, so it takes a dong preceding it to point out the object. So lo dong denpa, you will you could see in a Tibetan text. But again, because it's meter, he reduces it down to 2. The Tibetans love to get to a binomial, a 2-syllable unit. And then, especially writing in meter, it's built on 2s. So in this 4-line shloka, we've got 2, 2, 2, 3 in each line. Okay, so Loden then refers to having an intellect. You know, if you were in middle school, like I am, intellectually and emotionally, then it would be if you have a brain. That's what's, when we say that, if you had a brain, we mean, are you intelligent? You're intelligent. Anyway, he's not being flippant like I am there. But Loden, possessed of intellect. And then nam is what we generically refer to as a pluralizing particle. So it can just pluralize the word that it follows. Like if you had the lama, ordinary word lama, lama nam could mean lamas, just pluralizing a word in that way. It can also indicate the end of a list in Tibetan. So not this list, but you could have a list and then nam, and then all it means, like Sangye, Chudang, Soki, Chok, Nam, La. It doesn't mean the nam is not pluralizing that last word, which is basically Sangha, but it's saying that's the end of the list. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. In them, I go for refuge until enlightenment, that prayer says. So there it's a concluding particle, right? A list concluding particle. It can also have a third use, and it can mean the ones who, whatever the previous expression is. So like often the previous verb. So here it's the ones who have intellect. And Rinpoche translated that as discriminating beings, all discriminating beings. And then that's followed by a syntactic particle, a key, an instrumental that gives the idea of by or with, but it can also make the preceding noun a subject. So this could be a mini sentence all by itself, line 4, and it would say something like intelligent beings or all discriminating beings. And then we have what I have termed a 3-part verb, extremely common as the last 3 syllables of a shloka to be the main verb. The end of line 2 can very often be a verb, but it's a subordinate verb of some kind. And the main verb comes in the last box. You could say the last 3 syllables of the shloka, that's the main verb. And, something very important to the shloka as a whole. So we have shepar ja here. So shepa is the main verb, and we have a footnote 4 on that points out it's a class 5 verb, meaning to know, to understand, etc. Right? And then the ra, shepa, is the infinitive form that's made by adding pa or wa to the root of any Tibetan verb. So the root she just means to know. And then we have things like she rab, superior kind of knowing, that's prajna, and ye she, jnana, primordial knowing, etc. But here we just have shepa, know, and then that ra is called the la-dun particle. It's often synonymous just with the law that we learned in day 1 of Tibetan, to add in of. But here it's forming the role of a linker, like a coupler, like train cars, chunk, 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 coupling together. It couples that main verb shepa, which means to know, with the auxiliary verb baya to ja. So baya to ja is perhaps the most important verb in Tibetan. But there's a footnote on that takes us down to say it's this spelling is the future of baya to ja dring bu j da j, which is a class 5 verb. That's a transitive kind of verb, and it means to do, to make. But then also number 2, it's a strong auxiliary verb showing tense or mood of the main verb. And so it can be putting it into the future, but the future in Tibetan has a very causative kind of feeling, and a very like precative or wish expressing. sometimes, and then, but just downright imperative sometimes too. So shapar jaw here can be ought or should. The jaws ought or should. So shapar jaw, they ought or should know. So the Khenchen translates all discriminating beings should understand. And then he puts in a that these six comprise the general explanation of unsurpassable enlightenment. So I was taking the 6 general topics of unsurpassable enlightenment. And then concluding on page 5, we have Jadreng Buje Sa Je Pa Sa Ta 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 Dreng Bu Te. Je Pa Te. Okay, and then the parsing. Je is a closed quote particle. Pa is a particle that can make a substantive of something, and that's like a noun-like thing. And so jepa can be translated as thus. So the quote, just je by itself tells us that quote, that shloka, that 4-line quatrain has now ended, that verse has now ended. And then by pa, it can kind of mean thus. It's a little bit hard to explain, but jepa, its function is just saying that's the end. That's the end of the quote. But then, after quote mark particles like this, very often, like in the title of our text, on the Pecha, it actually says, Dam Yisha Norbu Tarpo Rinpoche Jawa Juk So. It's not exactly a quote. Oh, yeah, there's the che and she are the same. They're just used after different spellings, words of different spelling. But then he concludes it. But here, that's not a conclusion like we might expect, but satatatadrangute is a continuation particle. So that can be the English comma, sometimes a colon, sometimes a semicolon as we have here, or the word and, but the basic idea of it, I've got more to say about this. Yet it concluded in a way, that's the end of the quote, but then I've got more to say about this, i.e. the whole book. But okay, so that's what we've got. And then he goes on next, as I read in the translation, to take those items one by one and give a 1-line definition of them, 1-line explanation. So let's go back to page 2. So Gyudong, Kendong, Ni, right? She's going to give a 1-line explanation of what Gyu is, and he says it's Buddha, it's Tathagata Garba, or Sugata Garba. The essence of the one gone to bliss, right? And then 10, the precious human body, as I explained. So anyway, he gives a 1-line, very succinct, nice, memorizable definition of each of the 6, also in a shloka. So 1 shloka to lay them out and say, this is what you need to know. And then 1 shloka, 1-line definition of each. So one time to conclude, I better conclude here. I was at a teaching. I don't remember what teaching it was, but I was staying a little bit away in a house. Someone had given me, a place to stay to attend this retreat. And 2 of my friends were staying a mile away or so. And they said they would pick me up, and give me a ride. And on the way, I was riding in the back seat and my 2 friends were in the front seat. And one of them asked me some Dharma question. Some basic Dharma question. And so I didn't know where to begin. And so I just taught them what I just shared with you. And all along the way, I used a metaphor to explain each of the stages. And that was of an avocado tree. So I started with the seed, and that went all the way through to the gardening and to the eventual fruit. And then what's the enlightened activity of the avocado tree? Was feeding people. And so then they said, then I finished right as we pulled up to the retreat center, and they said, thanks for teaching us the Avocado Sutra. So there you go. It's the magic overview to the whole of Mahayana Buddhism. So there we go. So I'll stop talking and we'll see if we have some Q&A.
Hello, everyone. We do have some Qs and some As, hopefully. Let's see. Um, about practical concerns of course taking. Michelle asks, did you say that reading and translating in Tibetan, like the reader courses, have level 2 as a prerequisite? Yes. And can we take these two courses concurrently?
Also, yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Level
Also,
2 at the same time as a reader course?
so normally I like to have people take a level 2 course before the reader, or a level 3 even before the reader. But if someone is really got a very solid grasp of level 1, since we have the text parsed as we go through now, I think it would be possible. But it depends on who you are. You know, a person that this is the very first foreign language that they've learned, and they have a shaky kind of grasp of level 1, probably not advised. You know, I don't want to get you in over your head in anything. But if a person has a strong grasp of level 1 and has language skills and base grounding in the Dharma teachings, then it is possible to do it that way. But it's um, preferable to do level 2 and even level 3 before doing a reader course. If you have a good grasp of levels 1, 2, and 3, you're ready to roll, you know, with the reader course. But and then we could talk about it personally if you want. If you have a little more question, you could write an email explaining your situation a little bit. But generally, um, I like to have people at the very least have level 2 and level 3.
Okay. Before we go on, we didn't share it on screen for reasons of time, but those additional shlokas with distinct definitions of those 6 general topics that we just covered, they are included in that booklet that Benta put together that I assume has been sent out to all of you. So we don't have time to go through all of these and break down everything that's going on, but if you want to do that, then this is here and we encourage that. Um,
And also about that,
Too much.
thanks for mentioning that and sharing that, George. So those are the lines that explain what each of the 6 general topics is. Also, it's possible that we would do another day like this and go through those as our next bonus class. That's a possibility. You could let us know if you're interested in that.
Yeah. Going back to where is this exactly? Oh yeah. Michelle asks, we answer that in the course of the class. The Nagiguni with notes. I guess we didn't explicitly answer it. Where all these things that say DT 55, DT 56 to 7, DT 38 to 41, etc. That's reference. Is that reference to the Divine Tree grammar poem? Yes. And if so, does the 55, like in the topic marking particle here, refer to the page or to the verse? It's to the verse. They don't match up, right? I don't think they do. Verse 55 is not necessarily on page 55.
No, it's not. That's right. It's not at all. It refers to the verses.
There's probably one page in which that is true, but they don't. There's no correlation between the two. Let's see. Moving on. Next question. Donald asks more of a Dharma question. The Dalai Lama says that the Jewel Ornament of Liberation is a fusing of Lam Rim, which is from the Kadampa tradition, and Mahamudra. As this text does not include tantric references, what is His Holiness the Dalai Lama referring to? And are there examples in this text in the JOL that refer to the Mahamudra?
What was the last sentence, please? The last.
Are there examples in the text that refer more explicitly to the Mahamudra?
So first of all, it puts together not Lam Rim and Mahamudra, but the Kadampa teachings and Mahamudra, and then genre of text that it is a Lamrim text, the Jewel Ornament. And Atisha wrote the first Lamrim text, but he wrote it in Sanskrit and it was translated into Tibetan. So Gampopa's is the first Tibetan written Lamrim text, and then others followed in his example. It's had such an impact that other people wrote their own, like Tsongkhapa in the Gelug tradition and Jigme Lingpa in the Nyingma tradition, for instance. And then yes, I think there are, but I can't cite them right now. Yeah, I think there's definitely Mahamudra ideas referenced in the text.
Okay. Candace asks, is level 3 planned?
Teaching of level 3?
Yeah.
I don't know. We're not teaching at level 3 next quarter. Next semester, I don't think, are we? Because
No, not this upcoming
we're teaching
quarter.
1, 2, and a reader.
Right. If there's enough interest in it, then we will offer it. Something that we can run into is the higher level courses. We just need enough people to be interested in them for us to be able to offer them. So if enough of you get through and enjoy level 1 and 2 and want some more, then let us know and we can offer it.
Yeah, and also even someone who's had it before that would like to do it again. Anyone interested in having a level 3, as George says, do let us know.
Donald asks, does the new course, meaning I assume the new reader course, the new reader booklet, does this new course work with verbs?
Yes.
We're also working very slowly, unfortunately, on level 4, which is going to be centered around verbs. Verbs are gonna take the front seat in that one. It's a complicated subject with a lot of ins and outs, and no consensus among grammarians, so it's taking a while, but soon TM. All right. I think that's all the questions that we have for today. So thanks for tuning in and thanks for sticking around, and hope to see you in TLI courses in the future.
Okay, thanks a lot, George. I'll just point out here in the Pecha. So the Pecha is cruising along from the top there, reading left to right in prose. And then right here is the dome knee. And see that little space there? You very, very often don't see that, but the dome knee tells us this is the summary, of the 6 topics that we need to know. And then they do have that little space there. So that would be a hint in this text. So that's a compassionate insert that you don't always see. But you can see what I mean about prose. It just all goes along like that. And then it says, did I point to the right place? Yes. Dong ni, gyu dong, ten dong, ken dong ni. Okay. So thank you all very, very much for coming, taking some time on what for most of you is Saturday. And we'll conclude now with a dedication, which is also a shloka. By this beneficial activity, may I obtain omniscience, and having vanquished the harmful enemies, greed, anger, delusion, may I liberate all beings from the ocean of becoming, which is tossed about by the waves of birth, aging, illness, and death. In Tibetan. So here, Sunam Di Tamche Zipan Yi. This one's 9 syllables in each line. 9, 9, 9, 9. Sunam Di Tamche Zipan Yi. Tobne Nepe Dranam Pamje Ne. Kega Nachi Balab Trupai. Sipe Sole Drowa Drowar Show. Okay, La, thank you all very much. Stay well. May all beings be safe, healthy, at peace, joyful, and completely liberated in all the cosmos of cosmoses. All right. Thanks a million again. Much gratitude, everyone. Tashi Dele. 2GJ and Tashi Dele.